welcome back to Off the Record with A&A. Hope you guys enjoyed our Super Bowl episode premiered this morning. If you guys haven't checked that out, go watch it for sure. It was a really good one. I know we both enjoyed talking about the Super Bowl and the Kansas City Chiefs winning. But today, this episode, we're going to be talking about the college basketball and the new AP poll that dropped Monday. So let's get into that. Let me just share my screen real quick and we can look at the poll. All right. So, Mass, you want to just get into it?
Yeah, sure. So the first thing everyone notices right away is we have a new team at number one, Alabama. A lot of people thought they were going to move down after they lost to OU by like 28 points, but they stayed right where they were, and now they're moving up to number one. Your thoughts on that, Raina? Do you think they deserve that number one spot, or would you rather see Houston or Purdue there?
Purdue had a terrible loss. I think I can't remember if it was Saturday or Sunday. Northwestern, not a good loss for them. I do really think it is very surprising. They only got two first place votes though. Like I think Purdue is still the best team in college basketball right now. I know they had a loss last week to a very good Indiana team. Indiana's getting hot now late in the year, and they also had a bad loss this weekend, as I just said. But still, two votes for first place for Purdue is just disrespectful by the AP poll, in my opinion. I would like to see Purdue still number one. I still think they're the best team in college basketball behind Houston and then Alabama right now. I don't know your thoughts. Do you think they should be number one still?
Um, yeah, I'd say so, just because of how bad Alabama lost to OU. But I mean, that just really shows how good the Big 12 is, that the second worst team in there can beat them like that. But Houston, they luckily for them they had a good non-con run, but they have a bad loss as well that I think's worse, way worse than Purdue's loss that we just saw recently.
Exactly.
So if I think that I do think just overall Purdue's been the best team in college basketball. They look like the strongest team. They really haven't had a super weak moment. Indiana, I mean that's like just like a huge game for them. That's kind of expected. Uh, and I do think they should be number one. I think that it should be Purdue, then Bama, then Houston. But however, I look at the rest of this poll, and I kind of like it. I do like, I like Kansas and Texas in there. UCLA is a good team, but, I think maybe they should be number 6 instead of Texas, maybe flop them. But, last night Texas lost to Texas Tech. So, I mean, I guess we also have to start evaluating that.
Yeah, I do agree with you there. Texas Tech, very surprising here. They start conference play 0 and 10 or 0 and 9 or whatever. I think it was 0 and 9, and now they're 3 and 10. Yeah, they're 3 and 10. Three of the last four they've won, and both against ranked opponents, and also some of the best teams in the Big 12 with Iowa State, K State, and the number one team in the Big 12, Texas. So very surprising there with Texas Tech. I mean, that just shows you how strong the Big 12 is. I mean, that the worst team in the Big 12 can pull off these upset wins. But yeah, I do agree with you. I don't know. UCLA is really good, so I like them at 4, but also could see Kansas and Texas above them as well, just because the Big 12 is so strong.
Also, I would like to point out that we have to notice that Tennessee's all the way down to 10, and they were in the top 5 for a while. Big drop for them, but Baylor climbing up 5 spots. Baylor is a good basketball team. They just had a rough start in Big 12 conference play. I think that they're a great team. I think they should be ahead of Arizona and Virginia. I think that they're going to continue to win games. Scott Drew and those guys. That George they have, he's pretty good. He's an NBA talent. I really like Baylor. I think they're a good team.
Yeah, I do agree with you there. I think Baylor should be ahead of Virginia and Arizona. Virginia almost lost earlier last week. It would have been a bad loss for them. And then Arizona with the bad loss as well, only dropping 4 spots, which I think is crazy. I mean, they should be lower than 8, in my opinion, after that loss. And then Tennessee, I'm still surprised they're in the top 10, in my opinion. They've got bad loss after bad loss in the last couple of weeks. I mean, Florida and then Everyone thinks Missouri's a really good team this year, but I don't think they're that amazing of a team. Yes, they're better than a lot of teams. They'll make the tournament. They'll be probably a 6 seed, 5 seed maybe, but still, Tennessee is a caliber team that they should not be losing to a team like Missouri, and they lost to Missouri as well. So that just shows you that Tennessee, in my opinion, is not that good, and they should be lower than 10.
Yeah, tough loss. Missouri's not a good basketball team at all. And Tennessee's kind of holding on to that. They played Texas at home and they got the win. That was pretty big for them. So they're allowed to kind of lose a couple games here, not move down too far. But I do think Tennessee's a good basketball team. I just think they're struggling to find consistency. I don't think they'll fall that far down to the a 5 or 6 seed because we're looking at this AP poll and like once you get to number 19 through number 30 is like it's just not very competitive and they're way below. Like I think that this year like the top 15 are a lot better than that, the next group. And even we continue to look at this AP poll. I mean, K-State, we beat TCU at home, right? But they are missing their best player. And we lost to Texas Tech on the road, but no, Texas Tech has looked good. That might not be as bad of a loss as what people think. I mean, they've had 3 big wins recently: Iowa State, us, and Texas. They're starting to play some good basketball, and their record might not show it. But I mean, if they're in another conference, I mean, they're going to be in that top quarter. Like they're going to be towards the top 25% of that conference. I mean, that's just how good the Big 12 is. That it seems like OU and Texas Tech don't look as good, but they can still win against good opponents, and OU can even beat the best team in the SEC by like 30 points.
Yeah, it just shows you how strong home court advantage is in the Big 12 as well. I mean, Tech getting all those wins at home. I think if I'm not mistaken. Oh wait, I think they did beat Iowa State at Iowa State. But this just shows you if you go look at every Big 12 record and you go look at their home and versus away, every Big 12 team besides the bottom like three, all their they've only lost like one or two at home, and then every other loss is away. That's pretty huge in my opinion. I mean, that just shows you how strong the Big 12 is, and then that it comes down to who has home court advantage. I don't know if you agree with that, Massey. If your thoughts on the home court advantage in the Big 12 at least.
Yeah, definitely, because you've got a lot of historic facilities like Allen Fieldhouse that they just don't lose games at. TCU blew them out this year, and that like rarely happens. Like they don't drop games, much less lose by a lot of points. And you just look around the conference. I mean, Hilton Magic is the nickname of Iowa State Stadium. They pack that place. It's a loud atmosphere. It's very hard to win there. Texas just spent a lot of money to build a state-of-the-art basketball stadium that they just opened up this year. I like it's just a very competitive conference in basketball. Even like with the new additions next year, it's just going to get better too. Because I mean, if you look at it, we'll lose Texas, but we still have like KU, Baylor, and we still have a lot of teams to make up for that. And then we're gaining Houston, who's like, has been very good at basketball. We're gaining them. BYU was a solid addition. Cincinnati's usually pretty good at basketball, like especially when they had Nick Cronin, they made a lot of runs. So I think the Big 12 is the premier conference in college basketball. I strongly believe that. And, just further looking at this poll, it's tough for TCU because they've gone a lot of games without Mike Miles, who I think is arguably probably the best player in the Big 12 conference. Without him, it's hard to win games for them, as we're seeing, and they're just sliding. But I think TCU, when they get him back, they're way better than the number 22 team in the nation. And then I think Iowa State's just on a rough stretch as well. But I think if Iowa State played teams like, I'm just looking at the list, and if they play Creighton, St. Mary's, Gonzaga, they're better than all those teams. I mean, Gonzaga shouldn't be number 13. They've lost some bad games this year. They don't play in a good conference. And I think Indiana should be a little bit higher as well because they played good basketball recently.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Gonzaga should not be 13. Indiana is a little better than 14. Also, Miami I don't think should be 15, but we'll put them there, I guess. They are better than some of these teams though, below them. Xavier, they did lose earlier, but then come back and win. UConn beats Marquette. And then
And Marquette shouldn't be that high at number 11. They should be a lot lower than that.
exactly. UConn beating Marquette, and then Marquette only drops one. That's very surprising to me. But a team right now that's getting on a roll late here is Creighton as well. Creighton's 8-1 in their last 9 games. They've had some good ranked wins in the Big East. They were a team that started top 9 at the beginning of the year in the AP poll and then dropped out and then haven't really made it back to the AP poll until a couple weeks ago. So this is a team that you should watch out for in March, in my opinion. Creighton is a good basketball team. Your thoughts on Creighton?
Yeah, sure. So last week I would have said it's a disappointing season for them because I think for a large part of the season they went unranked as well.
Yeah.
Because there was a lot of hype around them because they were saying like, oh, this could be one of their best teams ever. Like they've got a lot of talent. They started the year at number 7 or number 8, I think, and they just dropped. But I mean, that's the nice thing is, they're in a conference to where they can turn it around, make it a run. I mean, you look at the Big East, like Marquette should be closer to them than what they are right now. Like they shouldn't be a 7-spot difference. And then, UConn, man, they were like a top 5 team at one point in the year. They looked really good, but I mean, they've lost a lot more games than what people thought. So, Creighton, I think they've still got plenty of time to even get a pretty solid seed for March Madness. And, I think we're starting to see more similar team to what people were calling them at the beginning of the year. Maybe not that good, but they're definitely playing a lot better basketball.
Yeah. Let's see. Speaking of UConn, they get that big win against Marquette. I mean, Marquette, in my opinion, isn't that great of a basketball team, but still looks really good for UConn, as Marquette was number 10 last week. And then just disappointing loss against Creighton. Yes, Creighton is a very good basketball team right now, but I think UConn overall is better than Creighton in my opinion. But UConn's still struggling to figure out how to win some games. Ever since being ranked in the top 5 at the early in the conference play.
Yeah, so I think UConn's going to be a dangerous team at March Madness because I don't get how they've lost so many games because I mean they've got a lot of great 3-point shooters. They've got a good center. I think that they're a team that'll end up getting like a 4 seed in the tournament. But if you're one of those top seeds, you don't want them on your side. If I'm Purdue, I don't want to play UConn. If I'm Alabama, I don't want to play UConn. They're a solid team, and I think Rain, if you scroll down a little bit more, we'll look at the rest of this poll. I just talked about TCU. San Diego State, I got the chance to watch them play, and they look pretty solid. They're not going to get a whole lot of recognition in the Mountain West, but they're not a bad team. But then, Providence shouldn't be in there. NC State, I mean, I think 23, like it's about as high as you can rank them. And another story is Florida Atlantic at number 25. That's a really good record. 24-2 is really good, but they play in a conference of nobody. So, I'd rather see someone like, Northwestern coming off a big win. I'd rather see them in there, or I'd rather see a good, or not a good, I'd rather see like a, better Big Ten team in there like Illinois. So I think Northwestern and Illinois are 2 teams you could take and you could put in over Florida Atlantic and Providence.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Also, maybe in Oklahoma State as well. They've also started to win games. They're really turning it on in Big 12 play. I think they've won 5 in a row now.
And
If I'm
if
not
you
wrong.
look at the Big 12 standings, Oklahoma State is not that far back. Like I think they are like a game back from
They're
K-State.
7-5 in Big 12 play, and Texas is leading the Big 12 8-4.
Yeah, so add them to that list. I think what I think Oklahoma State should be ranked. I think that they should be in there at number 24. I mean, and then I'd take Northwestern right behind them because that's a great point, Raina, that Big 12 basketball. If Oklahoma State is in Providence or NC State's conference, I mean, their record's a lot better right now. And if you look at just the fact that they're 7-5 in the best conference in college basketball, I mean, that's good.
Yeah, I think anyone with a winning record in conference play in the Big 12 should deserve to be ranked, in my opinion. Um, And that also gets me to the point where now we see Texas Tech starting to make a run and winning some games as well. Could we see all 10 of these Big 12 teams now being ranked if Tech starts to get some more wins in the last couple weeks until tournament play?
No, I don't think they'll all be ranked, but I think that there's an argument for them all to get into
Oh yeah,
March
March Madness.
Madness.
That's what I meant. Sorry.
No, you're good. I think that I think they should all get into March Madness, right? I think that, you just take the fact that the second worst team in the Big 12, OU, beats Alabama by almost 30 points, right? And then you look at the bottom team, Texas Tech, and, they've been competitive in a lot of games they've lost, and they beat, Iowa State, K State. Um, they just beat Texas yesterday. I mean, they're the worst team in the Big 12, and that's like they still have like four really good wins, and a lot of their losses are close. So I think that you take the worst three teams in the Big 12 and they're contenders in any other conference. I mean, that's just how good the Big 12 is. I think they all should get in, but unfortunately, we've seen a lot of. I mean, the AP poll doesn't decide. The AP poll is not always great, but it's a different committee for March Madness, and
Hmm.
sometimes we just see dumb stuff happen where like one year, they'll take the second place finisher in a bad conference. Like one year, I think it was Davidson got in, or like another year they'll take some like I don't know. It's almost like they just give it to like some like a team with a good record. It's just they didn't win their conference tournament. So I
Yeah.
think that the Big 12, every team should get in. However, I don't think that'll happen because of the flaws of the selection committee.
Yeah, I think committee they do a pretty good job with picking teams. The rankings may not be perfect, or teams should be ranked higher or seated higher, and some teams should be seated lower. But the one thing I do not like about the selection committee is their way of choosing the final four or final eight teams that make the tournament. It's just
It's
really
bad.
it's a really bad job. I mean, they always pick some team from a nobody conference that may have only like five losses. But I mean, you're playing nobodies and don't deserve to make the tournament when you're playing nobodies, and especially if you've lost five games against nobodies, you don't deserve to make the tournament. Like someone like let's just bring it up. Say let's say Boise State. They got a receiving vote for the top 25. Let's say Boise State. They go out. Say they have five losses on the season. They end the season with five losses. Make their conference championship or make their conference tournament championship, and then lose. And then let's say a team like Texas A&M. They they're a good basketball team. They should make the tournament, in my opinion. But let's say they lose like second round in the SEC tournament. The selection committee is going to pick Boise State over a team like Texas A&M, who's way better than Boise State. That's just how the selection committee is with choosing their Final Four. I
And
think it's
there's been
terrible.
teams that have been left out, like OU has been left out before, and like they've been a good team. They've looked good towards the end of the year in the Big 12 tournament. And then here's another example was TCU. They were one. I think this was 3 or 4 years ago. It was when Desmond Bain, that was his last year there. They had a competitive team, but the Big 12 was still good because I think that was one of those years where like Kansas and Baylor were both top five teams, right? Like they were both highly ranked, and Texas Tech was probably good too. And they didn't get him. They didn't let him in because I think that there's just a certain. They're not going to say this, but there's just a certain pedigree of like the selection committee to where they're only going to take a certain amount from the Big 12, even though it's like the best or the second best conference. They're not going to let 100% of the conference in the tournament, but I don't think it should be evaluated that way. I think it should just be, these are the best teams. Like I think that's what it should be. And
Yeah, and it goes on roster as well. I mean, Texas Tech. I mean, Texas Tech and OU. Um, they're not that great as record wise, but if you go look at their roster, they have some good talent on their rosters. It just sucks because they're getting outshouted by the teams like Texas, KU, K State with a little better talent. And like Massey has said a lot, if you put those bottom three teams like West Virginia, OU, and Texas Tech with their rosters into a different conference, they'd be thriving and they could possibly be ranked just because of how good they look in different conferences.
right. And then like, you know, trying to think of the best example here, but like they see the record of OU as like I think what they're like 13-12 right now.
Yeah.
They see that record and like that's probably like 75% of like, initially like what they think is like that record's not great. They play in the Big 12, record's not great. Let's get in a 10 or 12 loss team in a different conference. And but you really can't think of it that way. You got to look at their wins and you have to look at their losses. And they don't have two bad losses. I mean, they beat the best team in the SEC by 28 points. So I mean, you really got to look at that and be like, SEC's weak. There's teams like Missouri in there that are getting big wins. You got to look at the Big 12 and be like, that's a great conference. All these teams are competitive. They should get in.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And then also, just talking about the selection committee, last year we saw Texas A&M and then Xavier were the two biggest snubs last year that should have been at least in the Final Four, or should have been the play-in at least. And those two teams go on to face each other in the NIT championship, and then Xavier pulls out the win by 1 point. But it just shows you how some teams, like I forget who were the Final Four that made last year. I know there were some teams that were not good that made the Final Four that Texas A&M or like Xavier should have been in, because Texas A&M wasn't a terrible team, but they made that champion. They made it all the way to the championship game in the SEC tournament. So people thought Texas A&M was going to be one of the Final Four getting in. Same with
Yeah, and
Xavier
like
as well.
the first four. This is kind of funny, but like there's games where it'll be like 1 year. Do you remember it was Wichita State versus Drake?
Yeah.
I mean, like why is Drake getting in there? And like it's like they just pick a small college. It's almost like they think it's funny or clever to just pick a small college with a decent record just to here let's give little buddy a shot. Like no, it shouldn't be that way. Pick the best team. And you look at guys like Joe Lenardi, ESPN bracketology, and he's a clown. I mean, he'll only have like 6 or 7 Big 12 teams getting in, and like the 6th and 7th teams he has getting in will be like West Virginia, and he'll have like Oklahoma State. Like I think he had Oklahoma State in like one of his last 4 getting in, which it's like that's kind of ridiculous. Like the last 4 getting in, like that should be OU, OU or Texas Tech. They should both be in there. I think
Yeah.
CBS Sports guy does a lot better. Jerry Palm. I wish he would, maybe he'll put like 8 Big 12 teams in there. He doesn't have OU or Texas Tech in there right now, but I think he gives the Big 12 more of a fair shot than a lot of other guys because it feels like a lot of the other guys are more biased to the Big 10 or maybe even ACC. Not so much that anymore, but because I mean, if you look at all the talk around Michigan and people hyping them up, and they've not had a good season at all. It's just kind of ridiculous. Like it feels like every year it's it's Big 10, Big 10, Big 10, but the Big 12 is a way better conference.
Yeah, and I'm looking at last year's first four. We see, oh my goodness, we see Bryant versus Wright State. Like, what are we doing? Why aren't we putting like a team like Texas
Well,
A&M or
it's
Xavier
Bryant and
over
Wright State. That might be the 16 versus 16 seed matchup, right?
Oh wait, yeah, I'm looking at the wrong one. My bad. Like a team like Wyoming, they didn't even get. They played Indiana and they lost. They lost 69-55.
See, Indiana's a good choice there. I remember that team
Yeah,
was
Indiana's a
that team
good
wasn't
team,
bad
but
last
like
year.
a team like
But
Wyoming,
Wyoming, that should have been OU or someone else. OU or Texas A&M.
OU or Texas A&M, yeah. And then I liked Rutgers though, and Notre Dame for the first four last year.
That was a great game.
Yeah. So
Double
not
overtime.
bad there, but like we said earlier, this actually the first four was actually pretty good last year. They put some solid teams, some good conference teams in like Rutgers, Notre Dame, and Indiana. But I don't think Wyoming should have been in there. Could have made it a more competitive game with someone else like OU or Texas A&M. But we're getting close to. We're actually a couple weeks away from March, and it's going to be conference tournament time. Your thoughts on getting ready for that? I guess what teams are going to be sleepers going into some conference tournaments and have a chance to make a run and possibly put themselves in March Madness?
I really like Indiana in the Big Ten tournament. I think that they're a team that's starting to get hot later on, and I think they'll continue that forward. Um, I think that I think that if Purdue doesn't win it, that wouldn't surprise me. I think Indiana will come in; they'll be hot. I think we'll see Michigan upset someone, and and then switching over to the Big 12. That's the one that's really hard to call. I think that man, there's really not going to be any underdogs in that tournament. I think that the safest bet might be KU for the Big 12 tournament. But I think Baylor will win that thing. I think that I could see them, really just, they started the first Big 12 games rough, but I think that they're just a really good coach team. And I really like their squad. I think the Big 12, you could flip a coin, though. I'm not confident saying anyone. What are your thoughts?
The Big 12 tournament, yeah, it could be anyone. We're going to see some teams that could make a little run, like a team like Texas Tech or OU could pull out some wins. We're going to see those teams, one of those teams lose the first night just because how low seeding they're going to be in the tournament. But I do agree with you. The safe bet is KU. I mean, I think they're tied right now for the top of the Big 12, and they're also going to have the most home fans. Just being 45 minutes, or just being an hour or from Lawrence, from Kansas City. I mean, but we could also see K-State make a run as well, as Manhattan's not too far away from Kansas City as well. But it's just anyone's game in the tournament. It just matters on who plays who and what games, and how teams show out. But I would say my sleeper pick, though, I mean, in the Big 12 tournament, I would say Baylor as well. And also, maybe if we see Mike Miles come back, I think he
Oh
should be
yeah.
back for the tournament. So TCU could make a run there, and they could win that thing easily as well.
And Iowa
So
State's another team that I mean, it's just crazy how good the Big 12 is. Um,
yeah,
Iowa State's a team that they've got guys like Caleb Grill coming off the bench that can just drill threes. Like they're just a solid squad. They're one of the oldest teams in college basketball. So I think that's just really it's the Big 12 is just really deep. And
yeah, and
you look at other conferences like the Pac-12. I think UCLA will run away with that tournament.
mhm.
Um, ACC. I mean, maybe you might say Virginia. Um, but
The only good
honestly, I
team,
think that Miami, if they get hot, they could win that. Or I could see Duke turning it on later in the season, or
yeah,
I could see it North Carolina, like one of those teams getting hot later on. The ACC will be close, but not for the right reasons, just because the conference isn't as good as it usually can be. But I'd probably pick Miami to win the ACC tournament, and then SEC. I really think that Alabama, they're a good team, but I think they're going to get upset in there. And I'd probably go with, Tennessee. Tennessee or Arkansas, I think, will make a run in there.
yeah, I agree with you there. Talking about sorry, the SEC, real quick. Yeah, I do think Alabama's the best team. They're probably going to be the favorites in their conference tournament, but also could see them getting upset. Arkansas, I don't know what's up with them, but they're still a very good team. They could easily win against high-ranked opponents, but I don't know what's going on with them. And we see Missouri as well. I mean, Missouri, I don't think will make that deep of a run, but you never know. They have pulled off
They'll
win
lose their
against
first
Tennessee,
game in there.
but
I mean,
Alabama's
they
the favorite.
struggle. They struggle against teams like Vanderbilt, and they lose to
There,
other
hey,
teams like.
hey, hey. Vanderbilt is a team that could possibly pull some upsets. We see them beating Tennessee. We see them coming down to the wire against Alabama, but they could pull off a couple wins in their SEC tournament.
They're not a good
Um,
team.
but the ACC, yeah, I could see a team like Duke or North Carolina making a run. I mean, some of those teams. I mean, we saw North Carolina last year, not that good, and then somehow making a run late in tournament play. Same with Duke. I mean, Duke was number one seed last year. But Duke not that great this year, but we could still see them making a run. They are still cusp on being ranked in the AP poll every week. But a team that I mean isn't good, but they somehow pull off wins in the ACC tournament every year is Syracuse. I mean, they're always fun to watch in the ACC conference tournament tournament. In my opinion, I don't know if you enjoy watching Syracuse in the ACC tournament, but they always somehow pull off wins and when it comes into March and that's just very interesting to me because they never win in the regular season and then they always look good in tournament play.
That zone defense will throw teams off. It used to be pretty fun to watch in March Madness. Um, because like they'd really just surprise teams, especially when you win the first game and then you have less than 48 hours to prepare for the next one. That's when they'd really get teams, and they always felt like they're in the Elite Eight or Sweet 16, or they always won more games than they should.
Yeah.
I think Jim Boeheim's getting a lot older though, and their squad's not. It's just lacking like the talent it usually has had in the past. I don't think they're a threat at all this year.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, as it looks, they're not even as good as last year's team was, and last year's team was not good as well. But they somehow made the conference championship in the tournament. But they are a fun one to watch sometimes when it comes to March. But going on to the Pac-12, I do think UCLA is going to run away with this. You could also say Arizona, but Arizona has some bad losses in the Pac-12. I mean, losing to Oregon's not good. I mean, they lost last week. I forget who, but they just had some losses. UCLA, I think one conference loss, two conference losses. I mean, they are the better team. They are the best team in the Pac-12, and I don't think anyone matches up close to UCLA in the Pac-12.
No, yeah, I mean Arizona's not that far ranked behind them, but personally, I just feel like Arizona is not that great of a team. I think that they're ranked pretty high, but I don't think come conference tournament play come March Madness, I think they'll get upset early on. But one thing's for sure is I think this is going to be one of the better years of college basketball. Villanova is another team that they're usually up there, but they lost their coach and they're not in that top 10 like they usually are. They won a lot of championships with him. Duke, North Carolina are struggling. So, it's just a great year for, I guess, other college basketball fans that, it's wide open. Like this is the year for a team that, hasn't won a championship yet. This is wide open. Like this is anyone's year. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch the conference tournaments and March Madness.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Just want to, before we wrap it up, just talk about the last power conference in the Big East tournament. I think Creighton could make a really good run there. I don't see Marquette winning that tournament. I don't see Providence doing anything or Xavier. I think it's going to come down to Creighton or UConn, depending on when they play, if they play before the championship game, though. But I think it's going to come down to either those two teams for the Big East.
I think that UConn dominates that tournament. I think that they'll start to turn it on later in the season, and I wouldn't be surprised. I'm going with the UConn in that tournament.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning in to this episode. Thank you guys for joining us and talking about college basketball. And we'll be back with a special guest later this week. So stay tuned for that. We'll be posting about that maybe as well as our Instagram. And also, don't forget to follow our Instagram. Link to our Instagram page will be in the bio. Also, comment, and subscribe. And also, give us we're looking for some comments. Give us some ideas on just what you want us to talk about. Anything we're leaving out in these episodes that you guys want us to talk about. Or if you guys are interested in coming on the show, I mean, always just send us a DM on Instagram. Anything else, Aiden?
Big guest coming on later in the week. Keep tuning in, guys. Tell us what you